For a lot of us growing up, PlayStation demo discs weren't really demos. They weren't just ads you flick past, they were entire worlds. It was just little slices of games you'd play to death, sometimes for weeks, because that was literally all you had. You'd shove the disc in, wait for a grinding noise, the scratching of the console waking up, and you were in. One disc from a magazine, maybe one game on the shelf, and somehow those tiny bits of unfinished code became some of the best memories of the 90s. And honestly, looking back, it's a bit mad how much we cared about them, because they weren't just trying to sell you something, they were how we found new stuff. Sometimes they were terrifying, sometimes they were just weird, and sometimes they were totally different from the final game that came out months later. They were just messy, unfinished, and brilliant. For me, these discs are just as much part of the PlayStation 1 history as the actual big games. It was the Wild West back then. Nobody really knew what they were doing, and you could feel that. But anyway, welcome to the Members Corner, or the public entrance at least. I'm Michael. Most people watching probably know me as Parasign, the guy trying to document all 1,278 North American PlayStation games, which, looking back, was probably not the smartest idea I've ever had. But over the last year, this project became way bigger than I expected. People started watching, commenting, sharing their own stories, and just binging the archives late at night. Genuinely, thank you for that. The reality of how these videos get made is a bit less fancy than you'd think. I'm working full time as a chef, I'm a full-time dad, and the rest of my time just vanishes into this. Capturing the footage, writing the scripts, recording, editing, and doing it all over again a few days later. This laptop is basically glued to me now. It goes room to room, it comes to work, it even came away with me recently. While everyone else was relaxing on holiday, I was sat there editing footage of a PlayStation 1 game from 1997. Somewhere along the way, this channel became more than just a hobby. After a really tough time a few years back, this project gave me a routine, something consistent to focus on, and look, I'm not going to lie and say it's not about the money too. Life's expensive, bills pile up, and the idea that this weird archive project could help support me and my daughter even a little bit, that matters to me. So this side series is just a way of saying thanks. The main PSX Index stays public, that's the heart of the channel, but this is just a relaxed version. No fancy editing, no pretending to be a filmmaker, just me, sitting down, looking at these old demo discs and chatting about the games and the memories. I wanted the first episode to be public because it felt wrong starting this without saying thanks properly. So with that said, let's load up the first disc.
If you haven't subscribed to the PlayStation Underground yet, here's what you've been missing. PlayStation Underground, the coolest thing to happen to video games since the PlayStation.
There's something properly nostalgic about just seeing the menu screen. Back then, these discs felt massive. Every option on the screen felt like a door to a totally different world that you might not get to see anywhere else. And looking at it now, you can really feel how experimental the PlayStation was back then. Nintendo at the time felt a bit more like toys, and Sega still had that arcade buzz, but the PlayStation, it always felt a bit cold, mechanical and alien. Demo discs captured that vibe perfectly. It felt like you'd intercepted some secret transmission from a developer's office. You'd get these weird unfinished fragments, levels that weren't quite ready, textures that didn't look right, stuff that was obviously months away from being fun. You don't think about the logistics of it when you're 10 years old, eating crisps on the carpet, looping the same techno track for 40 minutes while you decide what to click. But looking back, these discs were basically little time capsules of games mid-development. Everything about them felt stark and industrial. Sony didn't really know what the PlayStation's personality was yet, so they just let the games speak for themselves, and they really did just dump you straight in. Modern games and modern demos love to hold your hand. You get the tutorials, the pop-ups, and the big yellow arrows telling you exactly where to jump. You get the safety net, but the PlayStation 1 demos, they were different. They were fast and they were brutal, and they didn't care if you were confused, and they didn't care if you didn't know the buttons. They just said, here you go, figure it out. And honestly, that made the games feel more mysterious and way more dangerous than the finished versions ever could. You'd make up your own ideas about what the rest of the game was like. You'd imagine the story, the bosses, the secret bits you couldn't reach. Your imagination did half the work, and usually, your imagination was a better game designer than the people actually making the game at the stage. That feeling, the uncertainty, the rough edges, those aggressive menu sounds, that's what we're going to be digging into. Because these discs weren't just a list of games, they were a snapshot of a time when nobody fully knew the rules yet. The original UK console bundle disc, the interactive sampler, Winter and Autumn collection, and honestly, there's something properly nostalgic about just seeing the menu screen. So let's load up the first one. I remember when I finally got my PlayStation, it came with this massive bundle: Tomb Raider, Tekken, Soul Blade, Power Soccer and Crash. But the thing I kept going back to was this mysterious demo disc that was just there in the case. I didn't even really know what it was at the time, just this black disc with the little coloured shapes on the edge. But that little disc ended up being the doorway to everything else. If you were a kid in the mid-90s, seeing Crash on a demo disc for the first time was a bit of a shock. You were used to 2D sprites, but those chunky 3D games on the Saturn that couldn't quite figure out where the camera should be. Then you load up the Insanity Beach demo, and it just looks fluid, it doesn't stutter, the camera followed him like a cartoon. But here's the thing, and this is what we're going to be digging into: the demo build is never quite the same as the full game. You notice little things, how the crates break, how the enemies move, how the levels load in. You'd never catch this stuff when you were just a kid, just trying to beat the level. But looking back, it's like seeing the rough sketch before the final painting. Then you flick over to Wipeout. That demo didn't just show you a game, it sold you an entire lifestyle. You had that thumping electronic soundtrack, the visuals were sharp, and for a kid from Liverpool, it felt like looking at the future. It felt expensive, it felt like club culture in a plastic box, and the sheer variety of it, that was the real magic of this specific disc. You'd go from the frantic, high-speed cartoon chaos of Crash, straight into the grit of Die Hard Trilogy. I remember being absolutely blown away by how different it felt. That Die Hard demo was a bit of a shock to the system. Just this relentless arcade shooter. Now this specific bundle disc actually came packaged with a few of my first full games. One of them being the original Tekken. Flicking past Crash and seeing a demo for Tekken 2 right there on the same plastic, that was massive for me. I was literally playing the first game and its upcoming sequel side by side. Even on a tiny demo build, you could instantly see the advancements they were making. The lighting on the character models looked sharper and the backgrounds felt less blocky, and the movement just had this fluid, heavy crunch to it that the first game didn't just quite have yet. It was the first time I realised how fast this 32-bit technology was actually moving.
Round 1. Fight!
And for someone like me, seeing Formula 1 and supersonic races on the same disc, That was enough to keep me occupied for the whole weekend. You had this weird mismatched collection of genres all sitting on one piece of black plastic, and because you were stuck with it, you played them all. You learned to appreciate the style of each one, even if it wasn't normally your thing. Most people forget this, but the physics in those early demos often felt a bit heavier or slightly different from the retail versions. The handling was sometimes more punishing, which made that first lap on the first level feel like an actual achievement. You were constantly ping-ponging off the walls, hitting dead ends, but because the music was so good and the look was so sharp, you didn't care, you'd just restart. That's why these discs matter. They were unfinished, sure, glitchy maybe, but they were raw. They were the unfiltered versions of what the developers were trying to do. For a lot of us, that was the moment we realised gaming was changing. We weren't just playing games anymore, we were engaging with a design language that was suddenly moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It wasn't just the games though, it was the repetition. Because we didn't have the internet or a massive library of games to jump through, you had this disc. You played those 10 minutes until you knew every pixel and every jump by heart. You weren't playing for an achievement or a trophy, you were playing to master that one tiny slice of the world. It was a completely different way to play. And this is where the demo discs became proper dangerous for a kid, because eventually you'd hit a game you'd never heard of before, and that one tiny demo would just stick in your head for years. Honestly, sometimes those demos were more memorable than the full games I'd spent my own pocket money on. That happened to me all the time. These are the games I rented once, played for a weekend, and couldn't tell you the name of them today. But I can still remember the specific levels from demo discs, the exact enemy patterns, the weird geometry, the one piece of music. It's all still there, 25 years later. It's a bit mad when you think about it, but it's just because we played them to death. When you didn't have a full shelf of games, you squeezed every single second out of what you had. You'd play the same demo over and over, trying to find the secrets, trying to break the map, trying to see if you could get the game to do something the developers didn't mean for you to see. You'd jump into a corner just to see if you could fall through the floor, or try to climb stuff you weren't meant to touch just to see if the game would break. Because of that, these tiny slices of games felt personal. They weren't just content you consumed, they were the places you lived in for a bit, and I loved how random they were. You'd go from a high-speed racing game to a grim horror to some weird Japanese puzzle game that made zero sense to a violent action game you probably weren't supposed to be playing. All of that in about 15 minutes. They were these strange, messy snapshots of what the PlayStation even was at the time. Honestly, I miss the era of discovery. Everything now is so convenient, isn't it? We've got the storefronts, trailers, reviews and gameplay videos for every single game before it's even out. That convenience is great, but it's killed a bit of the mystery. Back then, you didn't know what a game was until you played it. All you had was a screenshot in a magazine, a cryptic description of the back of the case, and the demo disc. That uncertainty made the games feel way bigger than they actually were. Not knowing what was around the corner, that was the best part. Even now, hearing those menu sounds drags me right back. Winter nights, school holidays, sitting too close to the TV, trying to make the demos last forever. It's strange how much power that stuff has decades later. And that's why I'm doing this series. Not to review these things, but to bottle that atmosphere, the feeling of finding these worlds in tiny, broken fragments. And honestly, sitting here going through these again years later feels strangely comforting. It's like opening an old box in the attic and finding pieces of your childhood you forgot were even there. That's all I really want this series to be. Not some big serious review or deep academic study, just a quieter little corner of the channel where we can hang out and revisit this weird formative era together, one disc at a time. You know, looking at this as an adult, it's funny how little it actually took to impress us. A single level, a 2-minute video, maybe one extra weapon if you were lucky, and that was enough to keep us entertained for weeks. It's hard to explain to people growing up just how much we replayed these things. There was no endless backlog, no Game Pass, no digital library with hundreds of games sitting there judging you. We just played the same things until they were burnt into our brains. And demo discs were a huge part of that. They taught us patience, they taught us how to actually look at a game. Because we spent so much time with them, even the buggy or unfinished stuff left a mark on us. So what's the plan? The main PSX Index isn't going anywhere. We're still charging towards that goal of documenting the whole library. We're continuing the retrospectives, the video essays, and those videos can stay exactly where they are. Polished, researched and archival, but this members corner, this is just for the people who want to see the outtakes. Starting next episode, we're moving into the members only side of things. We'll be tackling things like the first demo discs right through the magazines, the Metal Gear Solid preview disc, the one that basically defined stealth games, and eventually the Resident Evil 2 beta, which is a whole other rabbit hole of scrapped ideas and lost potential. We'll go through some of the betas of early development builds. Whatever we can dig up, we'll just keep marching forward. If you want to come along for that, to see us through the rough cuts, the beta builds, and all the stuff that got left on the cutting room floor, hit the join button. It keeps the laptop running. It helps keep this whole ridiculous project sustainable long term. It helps me keep making these silly little videos consistently, and it helps me keep doing this thing I love. But either way, thanks for watching the first one. It's a bit different, a bit rough around the edges, but so was the Wipeout demo, and we all turned out fine. So this isn't Parasan today. I'm Michael, this is the Members Corner, and I'll see you on the next disc.